And then other escapees that through their own.
Yeah, down at Cave Junction, it's a little scary out there.
Dude, they used to float the road all the time.
Oh, yeah.
This is Aunt Evelyn. She manages a business woman shows.
No, he's out of town.
Does all they ever.
Yeah, he's in Boston. Okay, Debbie, are we ready in the back? All right, folks, I think we're ready to convene.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
All right, welcome everyone. Nice to have you all here. We will convene this board briefing at 2:01 p.m. and we're just going to jump right into our first topic is the North County Recreation District PLT facilities allocation request. We have representatives with us here from NCRD. So if you'll introduce yourselves and you can I'll just turn over the floor.
Great.
Oh, Deb's waving at me there. That's from my mic. And are your buttons green on your?
They're green.
Okay, then you're good.
Shall we?
Please.
Great. Well, thank you for having us. Can I start the presentation, Debbie? So while I'm doing that, I'm Michael Howes, the board chair at NCRD. We understand there's some questions about our request, and so we prepared a presentation. And along with me is
I'm Mary Gallagher and I'm the board vice chair. I've been with NCRD board for about 10 years.
I'm Barbara McCann. I'm the executive director and one of the founding members of NCRD. I've been with NCRD since the inception, 1995 to 1997.
That's great. So we prepared a presentation to answer the list of questions that we received, but feel free to chime in at any time if you have questions. This should take about 10 minutes to get through, and hopefully we'll have a little bit of time for Q&A. So as a reminder, our district it follows roughly the Port of Nehalem border. It's centered the hub is in Nehalem, the city proper, but we wanted to kind of quantify how many of our constituents are, within incorporated cities or in unincorporated areas of the county. And it actually turns out, this is from the Office of Assessment and Taxation. If we look at property count, greater than 60% of the properties that pay into the district are in unincorporated parts of the county. We thought that was interesting. It highlights how diverse our population base is. There were some questions that we received about the pool, the new pool and the usage and how many visits we get, et cetera. So this slide will attempt to answer those. What you see here is just the water part of the old pool, the existing pool, and the new aquatic center. And to walk you through the difference in capacity, the health department would say there's about a 4-fold increase in physical capacity in the new aquatic center. Now, you probably wouldn't want to be in the pool with 190 of your closest friends. So we would likely limit that based on comfort and staffing, et cetera. But what's more telling is that the new aquatic center by design has 6 lanes. That's the minimum requirement for short course competition. Think swim meets, high school swim meets, et cetera. That's something we're excited to get back into once the center's up and running. Also what's very interesting, if you've ever been to the Sunset Empire pool up in Seaside, but they have a separate therapy pool and a separate swim pool, lap pool. And we'll have a similar setup, a bit different, I think a bit larger, but that allows us to have concurrent programming at the same time. So you could have your open lap swim or your swim meet practice all at the same time as water walking, aerobics, et cetera. So that'll be nearly a doubling or more of just physical programming capacity. Now, when it comes to usage, we had about 15,000 visits to the pool last year. And we're estimating that would increase, maybe 25,000 visits for the new pool. Up in Seaside, they see about 32,000, roughly. That's a bit of a fuzzy number, but that's where they're at today. And one thing to note is that we currently limit demand via not advertising heavily in the summertime, and that's due to the limited pool capacity. We don't really want to turn people away. We don't believe we'll have that same constraint in the new aquatic center. So when it comes to tourist visits or out-of-district visits, Commissioner Olson, I think you had a question about in-district versus out-of-district. We run about 10 to 25% of out-of-district patrons throughout the year. The 25 to the upper end being in the summer when there's more people visiting. And so then for the reasons already mentioned and the fact that it's a newer pool and more advertising this summer, we're hoping to see a bump, maybe 15 to 30%. So that could be on the upper end, 7,500 out of district patrons. And we'll get more accuracy around that once the center's up and running. Any questions on that slide?
I do, actually. I was thinking about the number of folks in North County, and maybe Nan Devlin knows this, the number of folks in North County who live there full-time compared to second homes. In Manzanita, I think I heard recently that it's 25%, maybe even less, maybe 22% of homes in Manzanita are full-time residents and the rest are second homes. So I was thinking all of those second homes count as visitors. So I wonder if we've counted them in that way.
The numbers we're showing are estimates of people that have come to visit. So they're just out of district. I don't think we have the granularity currently to understand exactly where they came from and for how long. There are some ideas that other parks and rec districts are starting to consider, like around geofencing and various technology concepts to really figure out if somebody's a transient visitor versus maybe they're here consistently. That's something for way down the road. It's still in its infancy as far as I know. So my understanding is that what we're presenting here are just what happens when people come through our doors. So I don't have a good quantification of that. I could dig it up. I believe we had looked at for the unique properties in our district. There was a tally of how many of those have a mailing address outside of the county. And that I don't have the number off the top of my head, but that was a notable number.
Okay.
But take it for what it's worth. I don't know exactly what that would mean.
Yeah, actually, we could get that just because we send the tax bills,
Right.
like the number of tax bills that go to that are mailed to out of county addresses.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank you.
Yep. So the remaining slides are about cost, fundraising, and schedule. Clearly, it would make sense to have a lot of questions there. I like to get the punchline out of the way first on the slide. So $2.5 million is the remaining cost on the project. That's our estimate. And I'm going to walk you through the table as follows. First up is phase 3. That's finishing the pools. We received an updated quote last week, November 1st. Of all the numbers you're going to see on this slide, this is the one we feel the firmest about. Now, with any project of this scale, there's still some uncertainty. Things happen, but we feel this takes into consideration the updated quote to get all the subs in and finish the work and the overhead necessary to make this happen. And again, this is where proof of funds are required to start that work and to sign the contract. The remaining dollars in orange here, or yellowish orange, whatever color that is, we're calling phase 4. These are informed estimates. They're not just completely made up. Some are based on old quotes from a number of years ago. Some are based on rough estimates, like from an architect recently chimed in. Formal quotes would be required here. That's part of the work remaining to be done. And so quickly, these are decommissioning the old pool. That number looks big to me too, and we're digging through the structural engineering requirements to take that pool offline safely. Commissioning the new pools is something where you want to get a commissioning agent and really stress test all of the equipment, train the staff, make sure everything is functional as it should be, and you've gone through the motions for every use scenario. And then there's a handful of other items, some of which are just necessary startup items that we just haven't budgeted for yet, and others are items that we've previously value engineered out with the assumption that we would someday bring them back in before the project is complete. These are things like acoustic treatment to make the environment sound pleasing, a water slide, which my 6-year-old is begging me for, bleachers, pool blankets, and a bunch of other items in there. So during that phase, while the commissioning and decommissioning is happening, we'd also be procuring and installing this equipment. So grand total, $2.5 million. So Commissioner Olson, I believe you asked about a contingency fund. Currently, we're running just over $250,000 in contingency. I think 252, 300 is the number I was told yesterday. What questions on this? So again, red is the firmest number we have. Again, the project manager from the Klosh Group was a little uncomfortable sharing this with the board chair before the board meeting, but we were able to get this number, and we feel we're pretty confident. The other numbers we're confident in, but again, we require formal quotes to be certain.
When you decommission a pool, what does that mean?
We're learning about that. There's it's I'll try to zoom out. We could get bogged in the details, but basically, if you just drain the water, it could collapse. So you need to fill it with something and drain it at a certain rate. But to do that, there may be some demolition involved. You may need to get some heavy equipment into this room, which we realized by talking with the architect the other day. There's really no way to get that equipment into that room. So maybe a wall needs to be demolished. But there's also, like, our board meetings are held above this pool. So there's functional space above the pool. If you've never been into our existing pool, you'd kind of, if you haven't, you should come check it out before it's decommissioned. But if not, we could probably send a picture, but it's just a bit complicated. There's also potential for earthquake upgrades and whatnot as the thing is taken offline. I don't know, Barbara, if I missed anything, but.
Well, it's just to your point about what it involves is we have to drill holes in it, and that has to be filled with rock, pea gravel or something so that the groundwater has a place to go. And the deck also will have to be chopped up, all the concrete, and then a level flat floor put in.
Yeah, this is not reimagining the space into like a gymnasium. That work we voted in our last board meeting to defer all of that. Let's just look at what it's going to take to decommission the pool. This is a conservative estimate. The architect gave a range, and we went with the higher number, knowing that if we have to demolish a wall while still maintaining program above the space, that could be challenging. And so we just need to dig into that in more detail and understand it.
What do you do with 1 million gallons of water with chlorine in it?
It's a great question. That's all part of the scope of work to figure out.
Don't put it in the river.
No, we don't. It goes in the sewer treatment. It goes out and goes through the sewer system and goes to the wastewater and gets cleaned up.
I mean, today our pool does drain a lot of water. It's not very efficient. And so luckily, I think that part of the problem is probably well in hand, what to do with the water, because the wastewater facility is doing something with it now.
But just to your point, when they built the pool, it did go right into the river. And we didn't discover that until around 2000, and that's when it got hooked into the sewer. We did a dye test and found out that it was going into the river.
I'll be darned.
Yeah, just the way they did things back in the old days.
And I had never read or heard that if you drain a pool, it could collapse. That's interesting.
Well, it could buckle up.
Yeah,
It's the hydrostatic pressure.
yeah, exactly. So the water presents a force on every surface in the pool, and the earth is pushing back on that. So if you unbalance those forces, just immediately remove the water, it could, buckle or collapse, or things could happen that we don't want to have happen. So it's an interesting topic. We're excited to dig more into it and reduce that cost if we can, but currently this is where the project sits, $2.5 million to the finish line.
And that decommissioning is just for the structural integrity of the,
Of the
pool,
building.
the pool, the building. And the build out of that to a different use is way past the scope.
Yeah, we'll come back for funding for that at a later date. So if there are no further questions on that slide, we have an overview of all the fundraising. There were a few questions about multipliers and individual donations, and we'll get into that. And again, the spoiler is that we're $2 million short, but we have raised over $15 million for this project. I think everybody's familiar with the general obligation bond that passed in 2020 with a high margin. What's less glamorous about the general obligation bond is the obligatory debt, the full faith and credit debt. So we're currently servicing over $194,000 a year on that debt. It's sort of kind of foreshadowing for if we don't get the funding, getting a line of credit is not extremely exciting considering how much debt we're already servicing. But I just wanted to be upfront about what we're doing there. we saved a bunch. We've gotten a lot of business gifts, designated gifts, grants. A lot of this work has been driven through a designated capital campaign with Fiorelli Consulting out of Bay City. TJ and his team have been really successful in fundraising so far, but we currently don't have a line of sight to this last 2 million. And you'll see on the next slide, we have some scheduled deadlines that we're up against. The next question, the next one highlights individual donations, and Commissioner Olson, out of the, to answer the question you had of how many donations are less than $1,000, 904 of those 915 donations are under $1,000. And that was just testament to the strong community support that we have always had for this aquatic center. And there's a question about future fundraising. There's a lot of irons in the fire. We have corporate sponsors we're talking to, grants. We have monthly aqua tours to bring people in and get them excited and, help with fundraising. There's a Giving Tuesday mailer. I think the Christmas tree bill, we're lining up for that again. I believe we were unsuccessful in that one last year. But there's nothing committed. There's no clear line of sight to closing our gap. But in good news, to end on a high note, since we last met, we have secured a top-off grant of $500,000. That's through the JTMF Foundation. I believe it's a John and Terry Moloch Foundation. Tammy, yeah, it's from the Consumer Cellular spinoff into a family foundation. So this top-off grant would only kick in when we get to the last $500,000, but that is now secured, and we're very excited about that because we can reduce our gap by $500,000. So now we're looking at a $2 million gap that we're looking for help with.
Congratulations on that.
Thank you. If TJ is still on the line, thank you, TJ, from Fiorelli Consulting. So schedule, this is sort of literally a screenshot from the project management presentations that we see each month. I'll walk you through the key dates here. So we won't sign phase 3 contract, the contract for phase 3 until we have proof of funds. That's why we phased the project all along, is that we had inflation related cost overruns that exceeded our funding, but we didn't want to let that keep going. So we started the project. This is at risk all along. We're hoping to have the proof of funds by the middle of December. 12/15 is a Sunday, so Friday the 13th it is. And really the idea is to kick off some long lead time items and retain the contractors, et cetera, for that phase 3. And phase 3 itself, just after proof of funds and signing contract, we'd like to kick off, have some capital available to kick off some long lead time items, shop drawings, procuring equipment, et cetera. That's maybe $250,000. Then phase 3 would start in earnest January 15th. When phase 2 ends. That's the current timing where construction would start. Rachel, I don't know if I call you Rachel or Miss Haggerty. You had some questions about when do you need money in hand right away? Are you paying for everything up front? And the answer is that we're paying roughly on a monthly cadence. When the work is done, we'd get the bills and pay it. So it's roughly monthly for phase 3 anyway through April, but for the whole project through June. When we would open the doors, which you'll see here in a second. And so phase 4 would start, we would ideally be ordering some equipment ahead of time and getting things lined up for phase 4. So as phase 3 is done, again, that's really finishing the pools and getting everything ready to open the doors, aside from that commissioning step, and then the final details of the startup equipment. And then ideally, we have a first swim sometime in June of next summer. And along with that would be a final payment. I believe it was a 10% holdback or something to that effect. Questions on schedule?
Exciting.
We're very excited.
Do I remember correctly that you were auctioning off the first swim in the new pool?
Yes, and I believe our board member, Erin Lasky Wilson, won it, right?
She won the first pool party,
And,
yeah.
and she has a good sized family, so I think it might be her entire family cannonballing into the pool.
That's great.
We're going down a slide if we can get this funding.
Oh,
gap
I hope
closed.
you videotape that. And did you auction off the last swim in the old pool?
Oh, we haven't. That's a good idea, though.
Well, we are planning major ceremonies. We're inviting generations of people who learned to swim there since 1930, and they're all looking forward to getting back in there, having their final swim. And We're gonna have, with the decommissioning, you fill it with pea gravel and rocks. We're gonna have people paint rocks and put messages in and get to have a little ceremony to put
That's
put
nice.
the old pool to bed and
Maybe
thank
we
you for
could
its service.
give them a token piece of pool deck rubble to.
Yeah, yeah. So we're gonna make a big deal of
That's
honoring the old pool.
And another thing, yes, we are thinking of these grand opening events. We wanted to have a commissioner's appreciation swim. So you have plenty of time between now and June
To get in shape.
well, no, get your,
I'm not much of a swimmer. I'm more of a fisherman. Occasionally I follow the river.
Or we could, water polo is fine too, whatever.
Well, we'd love to visit. We're not guaranteeing we'll get in the water, but we'd love to visit.
We'd love to have you. So in summary, because I don't want to take up more time than we're allotted. We're building a pool. This photo, as you know, Commissioner Bell, is out of date, the one on the left, but we're hoping to get to the right, where this is, I think, an architectural rendering from early in the project of the interior of the pool. We have a funding gap. And we have some scheduled deadlines, the first one being here in mid-December. And we're really hoping you guys can help us. Now, the last question set that is on everybody's mind, well, what happens if you cannot or are not able to help us out here? What does NCRD do? Currently, we are, of course, thinking about that. What happens if we don't obtain proof of funds in time? So this is a planned topic / debate for our next Thursday, the 14th is our regular board meeting. And in that session, we're going to be looking at a couple of options. We tend to like to look at extremes to understand the boundaries of a problem. So one option is to pause the project, and you would pause it until the funding's available. The risks here are significant. You lose specialized subcontractors. There are not many folks that do this work at this scale. But then there's also stickiness contractually with continuity and warranty concerns when somebody else is coming in to finish somebody else's work. That's problematic. And then there will almost certainly be a cost increase because time's moving on. So the next option that we're pursuing is to look into a line of credit. We've done some investigative work there, and I think in this board meeting next week, we would, unless something changes between now and next week, we would basically most likely be giving approval to go secure a line of credit of some sort. Of course, that's not a preferred option, given the nearly $200,000 we're spending every year to service the debt from the bond measure, but it may be the best option given the scheduled demand. So we're going to look at all of that in our next board meeting, and that comes to the punchline of the whole presentation: is will you help the residents of Tillamook County today with an allocation of $2 million, or maybe there's another creative solution to help us finish our aquatic center? And with that, we'll take any questions you guys may have or suggestions. We're really hoping that we can, I'm not sure your process, but drive to a decision to factor into our decision next week, where we need to figure out how much debt we can go into and, when that can happen.
One of the questions I had, I don't think you spoke to it yet. What, on the operational side, getting capital money is difficult, but sometimes it's much easier than getting operating money. So when you get this all done and you can service the debt and all, are you adequately funded to put in lifeguards and continue to service the debt and, all those kinds of things, put in an alarm system and all the things you need to do?
Currently, yes. And I say currently because this other line of credit that we're talking about here has not factored into that directly yet. So if we have to get a line of credit for $2 more million, that is something we have to think about very seriously. I don't know how long we could float that. But we did, Barbara, working with staff last year during the budget cycle, put together a staffing plan to account for an expanded aquatic staff. And so I think your question was around, are we set up to offer these additional services, et cetera? Right now, today, we have not filled all of those openings. The plan is to do that as we get to pool opening. And so our current understanding is we can afford all the things, including the additional staff, but it's tight. and
What is your total budget? I know you've got a tax base, you're a special district.
Yeah, I believe it's about is it $2 or $2.5 million?
I think it's 2.2, something like
Yeah,
that.
I
It's over
had,
2 million.
So that's a tax base that rolls forward with a 3% increase every year.
Correct.
Okay.
approximately, yeah.
And so if you take out these lines of credit now, banks that I've worked with, they have this nasty habit of wanting their money back sooner or later.
What is with that? I don't understand.
Well, that's how they build these tall buildings all over America.
It's
So
true.
do you have sufficient cash flow to service that and then retire it and keep going?
The, if you're referring to the existing FF&C debt that we're currently servicing, yes. If you're referring to what might end up being another line of credit that we might go after next week to keep the project going, that's a question we need to answer. That's part of the board meetings to help answer that
I'm
question.
trying to separate capital versus operating and, capital is one thing, you retire it, some of it's longer term, some of it you pay off quickly, but operating goes on forever and it tends to increase year to year to year. So you're going to double the size of your pool or more, and you've got other things going on there. And so I'm just hoping or wondering, I guess, that do you have a sufficient tax base and other sorts of dependable revenue that you can bring in you can service what debt you have, you can buy lifeguards, insurance, and all the other operating matters that would come up. In other words, are you thinly financed or you got enough to keep going? And are the bankers inviting you to lunch or are they telling you to get out of their office?
I mean, maybe Mary, I don't know if you wanted to take a, why don't you should answer this as well. Mary is much closer to the finances than I am. From what I've looked at, we are, it's thinly financed once everything's up and running. We are working on the handover plan for the new facility to get the actual operating costs and all that. I think we're good. Like we're good as in we are going to remain cash flow positive, then I think once this pool is done, we really need to take a hard look at revenue streams aside from the tax base. There's a lot of thoughts and ideas and work to be done there. That's something a lot of our other districts do to help offset the operational side of things. So I don't know if you.
I would say, in previous years, we have generated positive cash flow in our general fund, in our capital asset reserve fund. And it's created cash balances. It has created savings, which we showed on the previous slide. So that's good. We had positive cash flow. We know the expenses for the new aquatic center will increase. And we feel as in the current budget, we have accounted for those. One kind of questionable item is the timber tax revenue, which we try not to, the FF&C is basically covering, the timber tax revenue is basically covering the FF&C about $200,000 principal and interest. But we usually get more than that from timber tax. And that would likely be one of the sources if we had to do a bridge loan, which we really don't want to do, but that would be one of the sources.
Well,
I would like to add to that,
go ahead.
because one thing we've got going in our favor is there's so much development and new homes being built. So our tax base is constantly expanding. And then along with the 3% that you raised earlier, that it's just working in our favor that our revenue is growing because our district is growing so rapidly.
Well, I understand that and I appreciate you're a special district. You have your own governing body and you do what you need to do. I'm just thinking on the county side, if we advance the money to you, I wouldn't necessarily want it to appear 6 months later that we put it into a project that can't sustain itself. For one reason, it's not particularly good business, nor is it good publicity. So I'm just thinking, are you like, if you have, are you 120% above what you need, something like that? And I don't want to get into your finances. That's your issue, but you're coming to the county asking for some money.
Yeah.
And so the part of the job of the three of us is to make sure it's wisely invested and the taxpayers as a whole have some benefit coming back. Now, everybody here, I think I can't speak for these two, but we love this project and you guys are stellar in what you do. But if you back yourself in a corner, I think it would be a mistake. And I'm a fiscal conservative for the most part. I like to have more money than you actually need because you can't see around a corner. So that's the reason for my questions, and I think you've answered them. But you know, I think if we wanted, we the county, considering advancing some money either on a matching basis or in some form, I'd sure want to have a harder look at your finances, make sure that you can sustain yourself. I don't think we'd look for money coming back. It wouldn't be a loan; it would be an outright grant of some sort. But a year from now or 2 years from now, are you going to be scratching the walls again to find money?
So
Understandable.
yeah, your concern is that the operating cost after everything is done and paid for is greater than our income and
Exactly.
yeah.
Yeah.
No, that's a fair, I don't know that we have any slides or presentation to back that up right now. I've seen no indication that that's a risk. You know, I think to Mary's point, you know, the on this previous slide for fundraising, I mean, it was almost $2.6 million in capital reserves. That was carryover from each year. So we don't do bridge loans to bridge the gap from our fiscal year start to when we get the tax revenue. We plan ahead for that. So I think if anything, you know, also I think in getting the type of bond that we did, our financials are pretty solid. They're very solid. We just had the, you know, auditors reports being put through right now. So I appreciate your concern. I worry about that as well, but I have seen no indication that that is a real concern. We will, of course, need to increase revenue streams every year and work on aspects like that. But I think we have a sustainable business, and I think that the patronage increase for just the whole town, or the whole city, but also the other parts of our district are going to help as well. Like Riverbend Players, you know, that we had a concert last week. I think Riverbend Players average about 20% of their patrons are to come see shows or for our performing arts center are coming from out of the district. And I think more people may not come here just for NCRD, but they will likely buy some coffee and go to Wanda's and do a bunch of other things while they're here. And it's up to us to offer the quality of service that they expect from their home areas as well. And that's what we're trying to do.
Yeah, thank you.
Any other questions?
You have questions. Welcome.
I'm
Welcome.
so sorry. I hopefully explained a meeting with the governor's office, which is not something that you say I can't be here. So I do apologize to all of you. It's not that you were not as crucial. It's just you don't say no to the governor's office. So
Well,
I appreciate you all being here today. I am sure that there's been good, robust conversation. I think the only question I have, which I'm sure you've already answered for them, is I see that the ask is 2 million. If we can't do the full 2 million, does that stop the project completely? Are you reliant upon us for that? Can you just help me understand your options? So that if we want, say, you know, we want to look at this and say maybe 500,000 or $1 million or something other than 2, what happens to the project?
I'll say we don't need the 2 million at the start, okay, with phase 3. We would need the money, we could draw the money in installments as the project continues. Now, if we don't get 2 million, we are likely going to have to get a bridge loan, which adds more debt to the district, which we don't want. We are fiscally conservative ourselves, and adding debt to the district is not what we want to do. We continue to do our fundraising, and I don't know, I think Commissioner Scar, you came in before between the last meeting and now, we secured a 500,000 cap-off grant with the JTMF Foundation. So that just shows you, you know, we kept working that. We didn't announce that because we didn't have it by the last meeting, but we have it now. Do we anticipate to get more grants? Yes, we're working on those. And we work them very hard. And as money comes in, that would possibly draw down our ask of the 2 million. So that would be our intention from the start, from right now.
And just some more information to the phase 3, that's this date of December 13th. Having proof of funds to sign that contract to kick off those efforts, that's finishing the pools. And that work will keep going through April. That's $1.75 million based on a very recent quote from last week. So that's obtaining proof of funds for that next phase is the more critical bit. The $500,000 top off grant, that kicks in at the very end of the tail end of the project. Could we close the gap from the 1.75 proof of funds for this phase to the rest of the cost? I think it's likely. But at the end of the day, this project needs $2 million to get over the finish line and to be the pool that we want, need it to be. And we're open to ideas or suggestions. And anything you guys can help us out with, we're certainly open to. Clearly, it would be fantastic to not have to worry about these dollars because we've been at this for a long time, hitting it really hard from multiple angles, and we'll keep doing that. Of course, like we know how, and we're good at doing that. But it would also be fantastic to have some support from you all.
Thank you.
Thank you. Well, I am certainly supportive of this project. I think it would be a terrific investment in TLT funds. I think the money that we collect from visitors here to this area, that we're committed to reinvesting in our community, that for things that will serve visitors, but also be a benefit to the communities. I think this hits all of those marks. And it's very impressive to me that you've already secured 15.1 million, that you're really just coming to us for, this is what we need to finish it off. It would be an amazing thing to be able to help you finish it off. And I'm impressed with the variety of investments already. You know, I'm a North County resident. I voted for the bond. I'm paying for the bond. There are all the fundraisers you've done. It's amazing work. And there's a ton of community investment. Like you always hear in these sorts of conversations, you always hear, do you have skin in the game? You have $15 million worth of skin in the game. So that is very impressive to me. I wonder about, like in terms of options, I don't know how my colleagues feel about this. So, cause we haven't talked about it, we don't talk about things that we're going to deliberate on outside a public meeting.
not.
So we haven't talked
We haven't
about.
talked about this at all since
Right.
last we saw you.
Right. So I don't know how they feel about, would we be willing to to grant the program $2 million? Would we be willing to, if you were to get a bridge loan, could you figure out what the payments would be, and we would grant those payments over time so that we weren't expending the full amount right now, but if we were to allocate to NCRD whatever your payments would be, or I'm sure there are other options, but I hope that we'll continue this conversation about how we can get it done, how we could help.
Another question or two, if I might. Is this a prevailing wage project?
Yeah.
Yes.
It is, okay. Well, what I'm thinking, and as pointed out, we don't sit around and talk about these things in the hallway as our choice, because A, it's illegal, and B, we'd rather do it in public. So what if we advance some amount of money, and I'll have to ask Rachel, to speak to that, but let's pick a number. And let's say we said, we'll do that as a match. You get some commitments for that amount of money, and we'll match it up to some limit, let's say $1 million. So you raise $1 million and we match it and then set some parameters of 6 months, or pick a date that would work with your schedule, and it's fairly aggressive from what I see. And of course, the longer it takes, the more costs. That's pretty given these days. But so let's say that we said by you raise another $1 million, we don't care how you do it, by April 1, it will turn into 2 million. I'm just picking dates and numbers. Is that something that would be attractive? And I have no idea if this makes any sense with these two.
I think it'd certainly be attractive. I think the challenge I see is that we really, this phase 3, the contract will go through April, let's say, and we really need to show that we have proof of funds to retain the contractors and the subs and everything else. And so if we come to the table and say, hey, we've got, you know, 2/3 of the money, so we're good, right? We just need to figure out a way to, you know, maybe using a bridge loan or something to get the remainder of the proof of funds. Like we have to start paying this money pretty soon. And so if we have to wait until April, I don't know that it does this particular project a whole lot of good because we're already going to have blown through more than $1 million
I
by then.
understand. And I just picked a date out of the air.
Yeah.
It could be much sooner. What kind of interest rates are you getting these days from lenders?
5%.
5.
That was probably about a couple months ago. We got that
Do you
rate.
know what your bond rate is? I mean, that's a done deal, but you recall what you're paying on that?
Well, the FF&C rate is 3%.
Well, I'm thinking you might do a little better than 5, but then the prime rate's still way up here, so. And, you know, that'd be a function of your relationship with your lenders, your banks and so on, but I'm just throwing stuff out. Maybe there's a way, and maybe April is too long. Maybe it's January 15th or something like that. And we say, okay, then we could do this amount if you can get the other side put together and make it happen, because I think all three of us certainly want to see this happen, but the particulars would need to be pretty darn clear because we're talking about other people's money.
The January 15th would be more in line with what has to happen for us to keep from pausing the project.
But I remember your question, Commissioner Olson, about you had asked explicitly, are there any multipliers or any top, like other ways to multiply any funding that you may provide? And the short answer is nothing directly. The top off grant, like that'll kick in once we get to that point. So that's something that would certainly help. I don't think there's any direct multipliers, but there can be a halo effect. You know, if a large donation is given, that other sponsors or potential donors may take notice, et cetera. But no, I think all of these options are great. Feels to me, if there isn't a way to free up probably about $1.5 million ish to show as proof of funds, or 1.75 is the whole scope of that phase 3. We're going to have to go for some kind of a bridging loan in the meantime and figure out if we can service that. And so that's the crux of our next board meeting, and why we've been kind of pushing gently to get in front of you as soon as possible. To just, you know, it seemed like the funding might be available, and of course there's hundreds of other people asking for it, so that's the hard work that you guys do, of course. But
Ask a follow-up question, or maybe you were going to ask as well, which is, can you let us know when you discover what that bridge loan amount is that you can have, so that we can figure out if we can fill that gap? So I'll just say, I love the project. I want to see this project happen. I will tell you that mine is a concern of process. You are not the only project in the community that would love to get in front of us and love to get $2 million, right? The Salmonberry Trail just kicked off their $5.7 million fundraising effort. The hangar has been asking for money for years, right? And we've designed a certain process by which we have chosen how we allocate our TLT. And we now have, for the first time in 2.5 years, maybe 3 years since I've been, so I haven't really been here when we had flexibility, right? We've pretty much had it committed to first the Jensen property and then the Kawanda Corridor project in my time here as a commissioner. So we haven't been in a position of inviting people to come and tell us what they need and making decisions outside of an established structure in my time. Doesn't mean it wasn't done before. So for me, as a process question, I find myself saying we have $3 million sitting in the account. We have only heard from you because you're the other one that's asked, because we've not had a structure by which we invite asks. And it's a little bit uncomfortable for me, to be very honest, to say, well, just because you did ask, you're going to get it. And the other projects that didn't ask because there was no structure are now coming back and saying, well, wait a minute, what about me? What about structure? So I will tell you that for me personally, that's kind of where my push, pull, and struggle is coming from. Is there are others who have asked in the past and others who have wanted, and there wasn't any. So do we make this decision just because you have come at a time when there happens to be money? And that's not yours to decide, that's ours to decide, but I did want to just offer for you my thinking and my struggle, to Doug's point of what we're doing with other people's money and how we make that decision and having that be clear, transparent, well thought out, all of those things, especially when you're talking about $2 million, right? I mean, that's a huge piece of it. So I was curious what your bridge loan would be. Is there a way to get that to a place where maybe it doesn't feel so much like we said, well, we had it, so we wrote a $2 million check. That feels uncomfortable to me. So
Oh, we can get some more specifics on that, yes, and we will get that to you.
that would be helpful for me. I just have to say, I think I'm struggling with just the dollar amount, to
Yeah.
be honest.
Yeah,
That's-
I mean,
that's a lot.
No, I completely, in your shoes, I would feel the exact same way. I mean, I will say, what I think might, I don't know what other organizations are asking for, what their needs are, but, 60% of our district's properties are in unincorporated, county land. And then we've raised 15.1 million. We're so close. We're almost there. This is a very well baked, even though there's some wishy-washiness in some of the exact timelines and whatnot. Like, it's pretty precise given the information that we have, and we're ready to finish this off.
So the proof of funds that you need by December 13th, what does that look like? That's the 1.75 million. You need that,
For that.
not the full 2 million. You
Correct.
need 1.75. Is that right?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I can.
And
Plus the 500,000?
No,
No, it's on top of.
Yeah, so 2.5 is the project cost. The 500,000 would come off the top of this. And so the 1.75, though, the 500,000 doesn't really kick in until the end of the project. It's a top-off grant, so when you get to your last 500, my understanding is that's how those terms work. The proof of funds for the 1.75, we need to have confidence that we can pay the bills that are going to start coming in.
mhm.
And then we also, because of the public bid process, et cetera, we need to, prove to our general contractor that we can pay the bills as they come in. And so that's what that is. It doesn't mean a suitcase full of gold bricks. It's a guarantee.
Mhm.
That could come from a bank, it could come from a county, it could come from a variety of places.
The contract you have now with the construction firm, does that provide for taking this to this level, or do you have to go out and bid it again?
I don't believe we need to
No,
bid
we
again.
don't need to bid it. No,
We just need to
it'll
move forward.
move forward as a change order.
Yeah, this was included in the original scope of work with them as this particular phase.
Well, I was going to say, you could, if you set yourself up as your own public contract review board, in other words, you can make your own contracting decisions and exceptions if you want to.
I don't believe so. I'm not sure. I'm not.
You ought to do that. Rachel will help you set that up, right, Rachel? No, don't you want? No, you should look into that, because if you convene your board meeting, when you convene a board meeting, you can sit as your own public contract review board, and you can make some adjustments with some findings that you adopt through your board. You know, that's something to look at, because you're doing this kind of piecemeal, and there may come a time when you need to use a contractor who's there and you don't have authority to do that. So I'm just suggesting that that's a way, because you're doing this in pieces as you go. You've got little lumps here all the way along, and which is what a lot of organizations do when you don't have the capital up front. So I'm just suggesting that maybe there's a way to smooth that out, notwithstanding the money, and those are two separate issues. But
Yep. Okay.
well, I tend, just for maybe I continue. Thank you. What Commissioner Scar added too, I have in the back of my mind a bit of a concern too, because you showed up a few weeks ago, all of you, and gave a wonderful presentation and put stuff all along this wall here, this giant PERT chart going forward. And I thought, boy, these people have their act together. But there are a lot of other players in the county. And so I do have at least some concern that if we favor this in some form, matching or otherwise, then somebody else comes calling and say, you know, I didn't see notice that you were passing out free money. And I don't have a good answer for that right now, and maybe we need to talk about that some more process wise.
Well, we have a couple of processes in place. that I'm sure you know about. We have grant processes in place. We also have allocations. And we also have things the commissioners have voted on that we think are good investments of these funds. So I think it's, I favor process also. However, I don't feel like we need to develop a process in order to have this conversation. Maybe we need to develop a process eventually, or, in general, but not in order to have this conversation. That's my perception. I think that the part I really relate to is that I've had these conversations now with the Salmonberry Trail folks and with the Hangar B folks, the Air Museum, and everybody has good projects, and they're all really needful and important. The community cares about them. I think, to your point, Michael, yours is nearly done, and you've already have a tremendous investment in it. And so I when I think about the way we're investing these funds, I think it doesn't necessarily, it hasn't played out that we're treating everyone equally. It hasn't played out that way. The way it has played out is that when there is a great opportunity, like the Jensen property became available, we said, oh my gosh, that would be an amazing thing for Tillamook County. And then we decided to invest in it. So, but I think what I'm really getting at here is that these TLT funds aren't going to be enough for most of the things that we want to do. They're not enough for what Tillamook County wants to do. They're not enough to build the Salmonberry Trail. They're not enough to fix Hangar B. And so if we're asking people to, how can we invest money that you can use as leverage, then that makes more sense to me. And so I'm coming back to my question about, could you get a bridge loan for the 1.75 and let us know what the payment would be? And then we could allocate TLT funds that would help you make those payments. Then you could be leveraging TLT funds without us, spending our entire savings account.
I think that would be a fantastic compromise or solution. I mean, I don't know if Mary, if you have any thoughts, but I mean, that alleviates a lot of the burden of, operational expenses exceeding the income coming in. And it seems like that would take a big burden off of the project. So that could be a great
That would
option.
be like an annual allocation for the debt service on the bridge loan.
I'm just thinking out loud here.
Okay.
Would you think an annual allocation if we did something?
Or a semi-annual allocation.
You certainly have the option to do that.
And we have a precedent for doing that.
Right.
I mean, they tend to be organizations that are linked to the county. I think they're just currently the fairgrounds where we own the property. They
Right,
get an annual
right.
allocation, but we do own the property. And the Pioneer Museum gets an allocation, but they lost their levy back in the day when the taxes all got rolled together and we got all their money. So they ended up in an annual allocation because of that connection to the county. Doesn't necessarily mean it's not a good approach. I think the other thing and the Salmonberry gets one. Yep. So, so from an approach perspective, it's one we have used, which doesn't require us to write a check for everything in the savings account. I think the other thing that, Rachel, I would love to see is just as for us, when we get to that decision point, I think Sons, we're going to get a little more information from the pool folks as to what that bridge loan payment would be, as well as if you were just to get a bridge loan and what you could afford to pay, what gap is remaining after that. That was the other question I would love the answer to. But for us to look at what are the other pieces that are on our plate as well when we look at, we wrapped up the parking lot in the Kiwanis Corridor project, but we have talked about next steps, but I would love to have us kind of put this into context with other things that we may have originally had thoughts about for that funding.
I would say there's a lot to unpack there. You heard a presentation from Nan with the facilities work that she did with the list of projects. We are sitting on about $3 million, and we've been holding on to that because we knew these other projects were in the queue to determine what to proceed with when you decided to do so. So the timing, to know what projects you may want to proceed with as a county project or other community projects. I don't see you getting to a decision on that, a thoughtful decision on that before a decision needs to be made for this project. Certainly something we want to have and we should be thinking about, but I don't know how we would get there realistically. We could look at projects and kind of pull out your favorite ones, but I don't think that's really what you want to do here. I would also add, I think, trying to think of projects where the board has approved them, because you have all the discretion in the world to approve TLT funding for whatever projects you want, provided that they're eligible. There are processes, but you do from time to time allocate funding to projects outside of a process at your desire. I'm trying to think of a very large ticket project that was not a county project. You know, we talk about Cape Kiwanis, we talk about Jensen, the fair. I can't think of one, so that would be a little unprecedented for whatever that's worth.
We're happy to be a
Yeah.
guinea pig.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, because even the Salmon Bear, we're on the intergovernmental agency for that.
Well, they are a public agency. You're a special district.
Yes.
So
They're just
if
not
you
part of
had,
Yeah.
if you had an implicit guarantee, you can literally take that to the bank. In other words, we said, okay, we're going to budget $185,000 a year for the next 7 years or 12 years or some number. And the bank they would stand in line to give you money because the county government is behind servicing of the debt, even though it would be through you. So the more I hear about that, I like that better because we preserve our capital and we're just hoping this lady sitting behind you can keep the cash flowing in from the tourists.
Right?
These-
Which we will be helping with too, because
Bringing them in.
people kind of expect the same quality of service that they have in their home districts or wherever they live, and this aquatic center is going to it's going to change things up there a little bit.
Well, for me, for my part, that seems to make sense, and I don't know what the number would be. You said you're able to fund at 5%, and so, then it just becomes mathematics, so say over 12 years or some number, then the county said, okay, we'll put that in the budget. We have in the county budget now a few items that we have set aside as more or less guaranteed year to year to year. That doesn't mean they can't be changed because we only do budgets 1 year at a time. But they're there kind of as a standing obligation, and maybe this could be one. But then there are other people that would take the budget committee and the three of us, which are half the budget committee, to make that happen. But that's not out of the realm of possibility. In the meantime, the biggest problem, one of the biggest problems here is you got a pretty short timeline, like Rachel pointed out, to
Yep.
make all this happen. And we're going to run out of daylight here pretty quick.
Understood. So I'm hearing as next steps, we already have some wheels in motion on the line of credit or bridging loan. And it seems like there might be appetite, if you will, to like we should provide information on what that payment would look like or what that debt service would look like for that, whatever terms we can get. And then there may be a possibility to have the county's assistance in paying that down so that we're not over leveraged. Is that?
What I'm hearing is, yes, this debt service and the county guaranteeing the debt service on the bridge loan. But I also would say we definitely need an ask of cash infusion now. And so I would hope there would be two parts to our ask if we do this bridge loan guarantee payment and then an ask for some cash infusion immediately.
So can you bring back those numbers to us? That's exactly what each of those are. I think that would be super helpful for me in terms of the ask.
Okay,
If you were come back and say, we've run all the numbers with our bridge funder
okay,
and we can borrow this much.
Okay.
And that leaves this gap right here of cash we need today.
okay.
So that it's very specific numbers. That would be
Okay.
super helpful.
Mhm.
And you all can send that ahead of time or whatever, so we can chew on it and have that, and then we can have a conversation. And we can't make a decision in a board briefing, but we can come to consensus, and then it would have to go as an agreement, obviously, in front of the Board of Commissioners.
Okay, so sounds like ball is in our court to get you that information. And then we'll get that to you as soon as we can. I'm guessing it's probably at least a week's worth of work to get all that done. You think?
And from a scheduling standpoint, there is no board meeting the week of the 18th. So if this conversation, and actually I don't know if there's time on the agenda for the 13th, because Commissioner Bell, I think we were talking about starting it at 3. It may be a meeting on the 28th
In-
to give you time to prepare what you need to prepare, and then we're off.
27th.
28.
Oh, I'm looking at August. I'm sorry, 27th. Yes.
I'm not
27th.
gonna Be here.
Yeah, not on the 28th, but we will be on the 27th,
27th.
right?
So,
Okay, 11/27 would be, this would be presented at your board meeting.
I think the board briefing would be another,
Or could we do it next week at 4?
I mean,
Or at 3, could we do
if
it?
we also, I mean, it's possible we could get information. Do you think we could get that within this week?
Mhm.
So we could come back next week.
Could we do it at 4?
it's your meeting.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you think we have more than an hour's worth?
Currently, no. I don't know what other topics might pop
Yeah.
up, but currently it should work. But I don't know what everybody's schedule is for 4 o'clock. 'Cause that's beyond the board briefing time.
I'm okay. I don't have anything else that afternoon.
Okay,
So
so next Wednesday, if we
run late.
run this meeting past 4.
Yes, yes.
Okay, so let's say next Wednesday at 4, if you guys are, if that works for you.
Okay, come back and present what we,
Yeah,
All
and
right.
please send it to us before then, if you have it together before then, like Commissioner Scar said, it's helpful to be able to
I
review
understand.
stuff ahead.
I
Yeah,
understand.
so we'll send that to you and Debbie.
Wonderful.
Okay. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks for all your work to date on this. project. It's a lot of work.
Don't count on a commissioner swimming event.
Oh, yeah, that's on top of the list.
Ceremonial first dive into the pool.
They invited us to a commissioner swim, just so you know. Yeah.
Okay, Grand opening events, we're gonna have the Commissioners Appreciation Swim.
There's
Yeah.
Hey,
You have plenty of time to get that new bathing suit.
Right, exactly. Get into bikini
floaty.
shape.
Nice.
Thanks for coming in. Good job, Michael.
Anyway, okay,
I'll give you that.
okay. Great, thank you. Okay. Thank you. Nice
you
to
all.
see you.
Thank you for your service.
Come on up, Mike. So you and Ed work together where?
Ed was with the League of Oregon Cities for years. I was
Okay.
on the board.
Oh, okay,
And
okay.
celebrated with all the federal government research. He was just running through all these names of people that used to run the thing. Yeah, when you get this age, you run it, it's like crazy.
That's nice, small world.
Yeah, it is a small world.
Yeah.
It's nice to see him.
Okay, well, that is a good lead into our next topic, which is central services and CAO position. Shall I just hand it right off to
If
you?
you want to,
Okay,
unless you have any other opening words. So I shared all the materials with you yesterday and the leadership team of what we're going to go over today. October 9th, the board approved order 24061 that created the Central Services Department out of the strategic plan, created the Chief Administrative Officer position and appointed me to the Chief Administrative Officer position. I'm still operating in the Chief of Staff role until, in my opinion, I think all of this other work and decision authorities, job description needs to be finalized before I'm actually operating in that capacity. So been doing a lot of work since then in preparing documents for your initial discussion today. I've met with you one-on-one about all of them, and now I'm interested to hear you deliberate as a board and try to attempting to finalize some of these documents to keep the process moving forward. I've met with all the department directors over the last couple of weeks in one-on-ones. It was a great process. I learned a lot. I shared where we were in the process, and I hope it was also beneficial to all of them. I have a big list of things that I can't wait to dive into once this gets up and running, and looking at our processes. So to start off, so we're going to be going over two documents today. One is the job description. One,
Copies of them? Do you want him to?
he does. One is the first is the job description. And then the second is draft revisions to the board's first and only policy that's been adopted by board order. That describes, last fall you adopted this, and it was the first policy of this type that set forth what a liaison is, how's the board going to work together, meeting decorum, all of those things. Up until then, it had just been in a document that had evolved over time and was posted with our agendas. So I thought that was a lot of great work went into that, a lot of good discussion last year, and I thought that was a good place to add in. Well, first of all, revisit it. It did need a few other updates that we're going to go into today that I'm going to recommend, as well as it's a perfect place to add in any changes in decision authority that you want to do with regard to the central services and the chief administrative officer position. So we'll go over that. And then I provided a framework of just a bunch of different decisions, because we can say operations and make generalities of what your decisions are and what my decisions are and what department decisions are. But what does that really mean? So we're going to go through some very specific examples and see if we can come to some general themes that I can then finish populating the policy with to bring back at a later date. So we're going to jump in and just see where we get today. So I'm not going to go through the whole job description. We've talked about it. As you know, there's a couple of outstanding items that I've highlighted, mostly with regard to the Veterans Department. I think Nick is on. He wanted to say a couple words about that. Central Services obviously does not include the Veterans Department. Currently, the Veterans Department is a department that I do oversee. I contemplated as we were beginning this process that they would be a direct report to a commissioner liaison like the surveyor's office or community development. Nick reached out to me and expressed interest in continuing to be a direct report to me. So I think I'll just stop there and let him speak to his rationale for that. Nick?
Good morning, commissioners, or good afternoon, my bad. When I approached Rachel with this idea, my mindset was that the veterans need stability and consistency that doesn't change every election cycle. And also Rachel knows the history of veteran services and our stakeholders, mostly our relationship with ODVA, which can be pretty complex at times. And she's gotten years worth of ODVA quarterly reports, so she really knows how we operate.
That sums it up?
Yeah, that sums it up. You know, in the past, some certain commissioners weren't really for the Veteran Services Tax Levy. Back in 2005, Commissioner
Really?
Josie was, yes.
Dang it.
Wow, that seems insane.
That's
Yeah,
surprising.
well, Commissioner Josie was against it. He thought that the federal and state government should be funding veteran services, not the county government. And his main thing was he wanted to get the roads fixed first and not approve any tax levies until the road was fixed.
Okay. So now the backstory is coming together.
I have the news article, which I can forward to you guys from the Headlight Herald, which discusses the situation.
Now it's making sense why you don't want to commit.
We're a bit fickle. We're a
Okay.
bit fickle.
Well, Nick, I appreciate your thoughts and your candor, and it makes sense to me because you have an ongoing successful relationship with Rachel, and it seems to me like if Rachel has the capacity for it, it's reasonable for her to have one liaison department in addition to central services. But I leave it up to her whether or not she has the capacity for it, but I don't see why, if we're all keeping our liaison responsibilities, why Rachel shouldn't keep one of hers also if she can do it, but I don't mind.
I have a different thought, and Nick, please don't take this in the wrong way. One of the things that we're really going to be focusing on more, as I understand it, as we make this shift to commissioners, is more time for us to be assisting in the interface between our departments and our community. And I know the veterans community is an amazing community out there, and with the VFW and the American Legion, and there's a variety of different groups that are really working with you to provide services to our veterans. And I guess I just wonder if it might not be actually helpful to have a commissioner that is focusing out in the community with our veterans as well. And perfect example today, I had a gentleman come and speak with me and said, I really want to see some homeless outreach to veterans. And I said, that's fabulous. Have you talked with the veterans representative at CARE? And he said, yes, I have. And I've talked to Nick and I've talked to the American Legion, but nobody's bringing us all together. We need to all come together and have a meeting. And I thought, that's a commissioner type role where we do convenings. And so I completely understand and appreciate the complexities of your job and the fact that Rachel is really ingrained and embedded in that. But I also wonder if there's not an opportunity to have a commissioner support you in that role. So I guess I would encourage us to think about both pieces of it, both Rachel's capacity as well as a commissioner's capacity and maybe what we could bring. I think, I hear you about the levy. I'm thankful that we're a long way from that. And I think that, we have a strong commitment from our community with multiple years of renewing that levy that would make it something that I can't imagine as commissioners we would ever try to back out on today. So it's just another perspective that I'd encourage us to think about.
And do you think it could be both? Could it be that Rachel's the liaison and one or all of us gets involved with veterans?
It could be. I do also want to think about Rachel's time carefully. I have now handed her my half of HR. And I do feel like we're asking Rachel to take on something really exceptionally complicated and large. And just feeling like keeping her focused in that area might be a better use of her time. So just thoughts. I'm not attached. I'm not going to say that I, refuse. I just encourage us to think about both options.
Well, I see the veterans as in some ways similar to the library. They're funded independently. They have their own levy. They've rolled it over now a time or two, and it's very modest at 7 cents. And there aren't very many people in our community who don't support veterans. And so the funding side of it is in place for the indefinite future, I think, we're as confident as we can be. What I do see is what was just mentioned. I think all of us could and should spend more time with the 2,500 veterans in Tillamook County. And I'm not a veteran. My father was and had some medical difficulties and died at age 39 as a result of it. So I have a bit of a soft spot for the veterans and what they've done for this country. And we now have a beautiful monument right across the street here. So the veterans are very active. And like I said, I think there's around 2,500. So I think regardless of how this is organized, people, the three of us, whoever's in this position into the future, needs to spend more time with these people because they're one of a kind. They're, there's new ones coming through, but there's a lot of old ones that need help. So the organization side of it, I could go either way. If you had time, and I'm also a little mindful of your time too. I've read all this stuff, and you and I have talked a few times, and there at some point you say, I guess, well, let me go back. I'll say it differently. I would rather have you do 7 things well than 10 things average. So I can go either way on that, and it's a small department, and the 2 veterans leaders that I've known, including Nick and his predecessor, have been absolutely sterling, good people. Nick just got reelected yesterday to the city council of Tillman.
That's right. Congratulations.
So,
Thank,
yeah, no
thank
opponent.
you.
So
I ran it uncontested, so it was a
Lucky.
landslide victory.
It could have
Well
been,
done.
yeah, could have been the other way for anybody else, right?
the point
Those
being,
write-ins.
this guy here, he's a pretty solid citizen, as solid as they go. He served his country and he's serving in them again right now. And whether he reports to her or one of the commissioners, I think is an academic discussion. And so I'm totally neutral, can go either way because he's going to do the job and get it done. She's going to do the job and get it done. But I don't want her to burn out. If she flames out, Tillman County's got a major problem.
I agree. I agree. I am assuming, and it's never safe to assume, I'm assuming that the Veterans Department is relatively low maintenance. So because Nick's doing a great job and they're self-funded, it probably doesn't require a ton of your time and attention. So would you tell us if your preference and tell us if you feel like you'd rather have less on your plate?
Can I break one other point before we have Rachel do that? And that is that no other department heads get to choose their liaisons. So I think we want to be thoughtful. I'm looking at the other list of people that are with us today who don't get the chance to choose their liaisons. So it's just one more thought in process that I would put forward. So go ahead, Rachel.
I'll respond to that just to say that people have conversations with us though. I mean, when there's a change, I've had those conversations with department heads where if there's a change coming where they say, you know, who they hope to work with. We don't clearly have a process for it, but I don't think it's out of the question.
I'm wondering if I should respond now. Yeah, actually, Aaron brings up a really good point that I think there are, going into those liaison meetings, there are some probably side discussions. I haven't been a part of them, but I think there have been side discussions between departments and commissioners about how a shuffle may occur. But ultimately, it is the board that decides amongst yourselves who those liaisons are. So I can go either way on this. I respect Nick's input. I also respect that this is fully a board decision. I can go either way. From a purely a capacity standpoint, they are a small department. Nick does a good job of running it. So I don't do a lot with the department. He even creates, his own budget, and we talk about it, but he does all of that. I am not, though, out on the front line, so to speak, in the community advocating for the department. Not that that couldn't happen with me as his direct report, and there's another commissioner liaison to be that external constituent connection. So I don't really want to recommend to you either way on this because I could go either way, and I can handle the department with him as them as direct reports, and I could also see the benefit either way.
Madam Chair, would it be appropriate if I,
Oh, sure.
this is really a very perfect time to have this conversation. There's a tendency to conflate administrative management coordination with liaison. And I think that, and I think you've already talked about looking into that more down the road when you look at your policy stuff. But I think it would be healthy for the organization to learn to separate those from each other. Absolutely, the commissioners are the right ones to be out there on the public, working those issues, meeting with your constituency, talking to department heads. As I said, nothing in this design suggests that you would lose any authority or ability to deal with that. However, when you get to the point where you actually have to make some choices, you need to be sitting there as a board in a quasi-judicial way. That is, it's not, it puts you in a difficult place if you're actually the one that's dealing with, say, you've got several issues you're dealing with. You don't want to tangle yourself up in the management part. unless you absolutely have to, and then you should do it as a board, not as an individual. So I just encourage you to keep that in mind. And it's real easy to conflate the two, but the roles are actually quite different. And the more you keep them different, the more capable you are of performing your role, which nobody else can perform.
Thank you. Do we need to decide on this today? Is that what this, are you looking for direction?
I am looking for direction. You can deliberate on this at whenever you feel comfortable. That is the last outstanding piece to finalize the job description, I believe. We're going to talk about one other, potential word change, but, the next step is to, have Commissioner Bell send this to Troop to figure out where this lands on the pay table after marketing it. So that's where we are in the next steps with this.
When is our gathering to realign or reassign the liaison responsibilities in the various departments? As I remember last year before I was on the board, we had a meeting about this time of year where we went through all this long list and said, okay, you've got some interest here and you don't. And then we had an issue with parks and all that changed. But I think we had that done in November, if I remember right.
It can be done in November or December, or it's even occurred in as late as early January. I was thinking it would be good to get through this process and updating the board policy because it might inform liaisons with, this is a good example. So we're on the horizon as soon as these
Sure,
steps get.
I can see the logic in 1, 2, 3.
Well, I'm inclined to respect Nick's request, given that it's a minimal time requirement for Rachel and she's willing to do it. I don't know that we want to immortalize that in the job description though. So it may be, where does it say that?
Other duties.
Yeah, that's
That's a good point.
I'm listed in the board order that assigns liaisons or my own liaisons. They're one of them in some of my other committees. So that's actually a really good point. It does not need to be in here. Although it is overseeing a department that it doesn't accurately reflect my duties, but so I don't know. I guess I could go either way on that too.
I appreciate
Yeah.
not putting in the job description, because I think that it's looking as we develop as well. And I think to Mike's point, it's going to be a very interesting year for all of us as we begin to separate what in our liaison roles, what exactly does that mean, right? And if Nick stays with Rachel for right now, that's fine. I'm not, opposed. I think it's a great piece of our conversation, but I think designing that as we try to design the Central Services Department, it doesn't make sense to assign Nick or assign the Veterans Department to that specifically. If in the liaison role, Rachel, you have a number of things in here, I think that probably could fall under the other duties as assigned. That we can probably find a space to put that in there at this point, and then to begin to, work on, do we have a commissioner as well that's doing that work on the outside function? And is there a transition over time that makes sense, or not? So it's a great one for us to look at as we do that.
Right, and we'll learn and grow
Yeah.
with Rachel in this role about what's a good fit, over time. We'll adjust, and if this isn't a good fit over time, we would encourage you to let us know. And we of course hope Nick is going to stay here for the rest of your working life, at least 40 or 50 more years. But if he doesn't, if there was a change in that department, that might be a time to change it. But I appreciate your call out, Commissioner Scar, for commissioners to be more involved with veterans. I think we should be, absolutely. And it would probably be good if it was all of us. We absolutely should be.
So where are we then? If we can take it off and there is, the liaison will be to one of the commissioners, not to her.
No, I think it could continue with Rachel in the liaison discussion that we have in December or January, wherever it is. We just don't need to immortalize it in this job description.
Okay, well, I would agree with that. The more I think about it is, I think here we are making changes and we haven't even adopted it yet. So, but it's a piece of paper that can be modified any day of the week, I suppose. So I would say let her go forward with the decision or the language that's in the job description. And there may be some changes on that as it evolves as well, but let the veterans report and have a liaison relationship with one of the three. Just off the top of my head from what I've heard here so far, understanding that could change at any point for any reason.
Okay, so let's take it out of the job description today and continue the discussion when we have the liaison discussion.
That would be great. I don't want to be in a position where I'm actually functioning as the department director and it's not in my job description. I know there's a lot of fluid conversations going on, so that's, so I could be in that position, which is a little awkward. But
Oh, you mean if there was a vacancy and you would?
no, I mean, so currently my job description states which departments I am, that I oversee. Taking it out, and if there's some uncertainty over the next couple of months, I would be overseeing a department that is not in my job description.
I guess I'm thinking of liaison responsibilities as a little different than the overseeing the, you being the director of central services. I'm seeing that as a little bit different than liaison. Are you not?
I absolutely am.
Okay.
So central services is, in my mind, not part of the discussion we're talking about right now with this particular topic. It's whether I'm overseeing veterans or not. And again, I could go either way, just as a point of process. If I am going to be overseeing veterans, I think it's important for that to be in the job description. I don't think that's the type of duty that other duties is assigned.
You don't think being a liaison is?
I don't,
What I'm talking about.
I don't think my role overseeing Nick's department is a liaison role.
Isn't it?
I'm not suggesting,
Maybe I'm confused about what you do.
well, no, it can be, and I think it is in part now, but I think where we're going is you're the liaisons. I would be his directive report. And I think we're kind of blurring them because of many things.
Yeah.
I'm not thinking when Nick reached out to me to stay as my direct report and it was included in the job description, I was not thinking that that would be in the capacity of an external liaison to the community. I believe that's your role.
Yeah,
Well, that's where it gets a little. So actually, I take back what I said about having him as the liaison in the board order. That would not make sense. Yeah.
That's what I meant about conflating. The administration, a lot of people, when you talk about management or administration, think about control. And that's just, in my opinion, the very wrong way to think about how people go about making organizations work. Your role is the role that you inherit as an elected official is the outfacing coordination, public versus organization kind of role. If something goes haywire, oversight, that is also your role. What we hope we create is an opportunity for you to delegate some of those the direct administration management issues if you're comfortable with doing it. And it should be a direct, I think she's right. If you're going to delegate it, it needs to be a direct delegation. And Commissioner Olson is also right. You can always decide you want it back. But the liaison, I think, rests with the board. Liaison and oversight, which is different than performance evaluations and the like. And administration and management coordination is in her bailiwick, independent of the elected officials.
Currently, I think where we're starting, my understanding, please correct me if I'm wrong, where we're starting is at a midpoint. We're starting with Rachel directly administering central services.
Right.
And we're not starting with Rachel, with the CAO administering.
Correct. Correct.
So our liaison responsibilities to other departments, to the departments other than central services, remain the same as they have.
Right.
So if you're saying we're in muddy water, then we're still in muddy water, but for now, but we're not with the central services departments.
That's correct. And I don't think you're in muddy water. I think you have in the past decided that you want somebody else to be the direct report in veterans. The question before you, do you want her to continue that role, seems successful. Um, And the role when you're in a direct report relationship is different than the role that when you're liaison. Uh, it is subtle, but it's significant. Um,
Which is why I think it's challenging to tease out, right? Because Nick is a department director and has the responsibilities and authorities of a department director,
Correct,
right?
right.
But we're also going to have HR and IS that are department directors and have the responsibilities and authorities of department directors under Rachel. So I think this is part of that challenge to tease apart what's different if you're under Rachel than if you're under a commissioner, right?
Yeah, it's the role, what you choose as your role. And there's no perfect choice here. It's a matter of you developing with your administrative manager the correct balance in terms of how you're going to define liaison versus management. A lot of it comes up in practice more than it does in verbs and nouns. When you have a budget issue, who do you contact first? If you have a direct report relationship, you'll get with Rachel saying, what do we do here? And she may say, well, let's go talk to the board or X, Y, and Z or whatever. If you're the direct report, then that question comes to you. That's the kind of, and you're right, teasing that out is one of actually doing the practice. But the more you're in that role, the less you're able to be in the other role, which is the classic liaison, public interface, and oversight. And that's when those two get mixed together, I think you can witness some of the problems you've bumped up against before. Is that, you look quite skeptical there.
It's not exactly quizzical. It's that I don't think we are where you're talking about yet. Where we are now from where I think we are is that Rachel is overseeing central services.
Correct.
And we are maintaining our roles as liaisons under their current definitions.
Correct.
If we change the definitions later, maybe that's going to happen, but this is where we are now.
Yes. And I'm not trying to fuzz that up. I'm just trying to say that you have in the past made the decision that veterans would be a direct report to Rachel. You may want to change that.
She had multiple liaison responsibilities.
Yeah.
So I guess we're trying to suss out now whether or not she will continue to have liaison responsibilities or if her only responsibilities will be central services.
Well, and I think it's interesting when we read through job description, she is the director of facilities. So what were your other liaisons?
Facility, excuse me, I would consider facilities and veterans liaison because Kevin is not a department head and Nick is not a department head. So
I
both,
thought Nick was a department
no,
head.
he's in a supervisor role, which is why I have.
Oh. That totally, okay. I thought he was a department director and that was,
He's functioning a lot like one, I would say, but technically not.
so I would say, okay. I was assuming he was a department director. That was how I always had understood his roles. So if that is the case and he is not a department director, then I would say you would add a bullet where you serve as the director of the Veterans Services Department, the same way you serve. So you have on here, you serve as the Facilities Department Director. So if I'm understanding correctly, the way we're structured, you would also serve as the Veterans Department Director unless Nick were to be, unless his role was to be changed, in which case if he became a director, then there would be a liaison.
Yes.
Are we getting there, Mike?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, you're the wrong way to do it.
Really. It's,
Oh,
it's
Nick,
whatever that,
thank you for being patient and being willing to let us. We're
Talk
usually,
about you in front of you.
yeah, talk about you in front of you and talk about your department and tease it apart and try to understand while you have to sit and listen, wonder about your future. So thank you for your kindness and willingness.
I'm anything you need me to be, any title.
Okay, we have clarity on that.
So I think we have clarity. Thank you for
Okay.
sticking with that conversation.
So unless you had other points in the job description, Erin and I met with Sean and Deborah and talked through this with them. I wanted to point out, I was hypersensitive to the wording in this job description because I didn't want any of it to come across as the board wants me to be in any department micromanaging operations. But there's certainly a coordination role in ensuring county operations generally and specific to central services is part of my role. And I know we're still kind of working through what that exactly means. So, talked with her about in the summary, the CAO is responsible for implementing BOC policy, managing county operations, coordinating the county's annual budget process, et cetera. Regarding coordinating the county's budget process, again, digging more into what your intent is for my role in the budget process, recognizing that part of what's in this job description is aspirational. It's not necessarily tomorrow or in this particular example, this year's annual budget process necessarily. But does the word coordinating reflect what you're thinking my role is in the annual budget process ultimately? Or Sean suggested collaboration, or maybe it's collaboration and coordination with the treasurer's office or something around that.
Sent one later that to me, and I think to you as well, that said coordinating with the county budget
Budget
officer,
Thank you. Yeah.
which I thought that was helpful in clarifying.
Okay, so coordinating the county's annual budget process with the budget officer?
Yeah.
Okay,
And I see that Sean is with us, so I don't want to speak for her, but she'll say I always do.
But also
I
collaboration.
think coordinating and collaborating would be fine also.
Okay. Anything else in the job description?
I think it's pretty complete. It's,
Good.
but there is no such thing as a complete job description because you have other duties as assigned.
And that is in there, but I think this reflects,
I've often wondered why we need 4 pages when, but this is a government job description. I understand that. And
for the record, it's only a page and a half. The rest are the skills and abilities, which are not duties.
the whole thing then, and it's still pretty lightweight. It's okay. It's in 2 pages, but I think and I read it pretty carefully a couple of times. I think it covers the waterfront, and I also think it's an evolving document.
Mhm.
I would bet you 10 to 1 that there'll be something different a year from today than there is today. Simply because we got new department and people change, skills change, things come and go, the directives come down from the state, all those kinds of things. And so, but you gotta have a starting point. And so I'm okay with what it is and how it evolves. And I think there was a conversation about looking at it maybe every 6 months and not annually or as needed. But, and that can vary too. But, I would expect as time goes on and we see all of you will be here looking at Rachel and seeing something is different or changed or significant, it either becomes part of this or there's some adjustments made. So I see this position adjusting on the fly. That I will almost guarantee you a year from now, it'll be somewhat different than it is today.
Agree.
Okay,
Okay.
so moving on to the policy, I have a track changes before you.
Before we do, can I just ask for a 3-minute break?
Oh, sure.
You're the chair, you can do whatever you want.
Thank
Great.
let's try to before this upcoming training session for another get together. Is there a time that works for you?
Tomorrow or Friday would be pretty darn good.
All right.
Online or on